Okay, hi everyone. My name is Miranda, and I'm going to talk about from chapter 13 a little bit about youth suicide. So, my why, right? Why did I pick probably the most heartbreaking thing that there is to talk about? And this is because I think youth suicide and suicide in general is something that we need to talk about more. Um, I liked doing some research on it. I was really surprised that the book said that it's the third leading cause of death of adolescents. And I guess I shouldn't have been that surprised, but it's definitely something that's very stigmatized. It's taboo to talk about. People don't like bringing it up. Um, but I'm sure everyone has had some kind of experience. You know somebody. There's people in my extended family who've taken their own lives. Everyone kind of has some connection, and mainly it's preventable. And so it's heartbreaking that it's the third leading cause of death when it is, in fact, preventable. So we're going to talk a little bit more about it today. So my news article, I like the title, so I included it in here. It was Say Suicide to Stop Suicide. And it was talking about um, exactly what we're talking about, youth suicide. It was talking about teenagers, 13 to 18, I believe, um, and opening up a lot about how we're at a time where mental health is taking a severe hit. So many people are diagnosed with depression, and it mentions a lot about how, teenagers have high school, they have social norms that they're learning to follow, they have tests, they have drama, they have everything going on. Um, and they're often very forgotten. It's kind of an awkward bridge where they're not quite adults, they're not children. And so, as weird as it may sound, a lot of people don't really know how to talk to them. They feel very outcast because they're in this portion of their life. But the news article also talked about, how with as many attempts there have been, talking about after the attempt, that transition back into school and everything is extremely difficult. And there are a lot of people who have attempted to take their own lives, and after surviving that attempt, have tried again. So that's something that they bring up. And the biggest thing is having an open discussion. They talk about ways that we can bring it up to help youth feel heard and seen, and like they can trust us, and how that just talking about it can really take away a lot of that desire to actually follow through with taking their own life. From the sociological perspective, they were talking directly to social workers in this article. Um, and one of the things that they said was, you will interact with those that are suicidal. And that is just kind of a fact. The social work profession, you see a lot of people, and a lot of the scale is very broad as to how well they're doing. Some people you'll interact with will have never had a suicidal thought. Some people you'll interact with will be actively suicidal. And that's something to come to terms with before entering the profession. But then they go on to say, hey, it's important, knowing that it's important that you recognize the signs. So they talk about if a teenager has become more secluded, moved away from family, doesn't have, isn't talking about the same interests that they used to, hobbies, things like that, and saying, as a social worker, knowing that you will interact with those that are suicidal, make sure it's crucial that you recognize the signs. Um, Talks about having this open conversation and letting it be, um, using yourself as a soundboard, but also remembering that there are times that you do need to take action. Um, One of the things from it that I thought was interesting, I'd heard this before, but I think it's worth mentioning, is they talk about men versus women, in which men are more likely, I think they said 4 times more likely, maybe fact check me on that, but men are more likely to commit suicide and follow through with it, whereas women are more likely to have suicidal thoughts. Um, but that doesn't mean that men don't have suicidal thoughts and don't commit suicide and women don't commit suicide, obviously. But I just thought that was an interesting fact as well to include. Okay, NASW, I chose the value of integrity. There were a lot that I felt as though I could have chosen from. A lot apply to the situation of youth suicide, but I chose integrity because it focuses on the trustworthiness of the social worker. And I think anywhere you're in a situation where there needs to be a lot of open communication, there needs to be a lot of trust. And so just developing that in our daily lives and as well as in the workplace is huge, of having that integrity and being someone that our clients can rely on. And then as far as the comparison, so I just talked about similarity and difference. So similarity, this one is pretty blatantly obvious, which is open discussion. I had to participate in a training for my job on suicide prevention. And what the expert was telling us is that a lot of people erroneously believe that talking about suicide is going to put it in somebody's mind or make them want to commit suicide when they hadn't thought about it before. And that is absolutely not true. Being able to communicate and to talk about it actually is a huge factor in reducing that attempt, which I thought was very interesting. They also said that it's so important to be just blunt, straightforward when talking about it. And that, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but just saying that having this open communication is a key to preventing suicide, because either you can help them or actually most times you will be able to help them get to a professional that can help them. But it's kind of awkward to talk about, but it's a bridge that needs to be crossed, it just needs to happen. The biggest difference is the setting, right? It's not every day outside of the social work profession or outside of these other professions that you're going to interact with someone who is suicidal. However, that's the difference, is that's just the setting, just the frequency will probably be less serious, but maybe not. So that's what I'm saying here is communication skills help across all areas. You never actually know. Obviously, social workers are professionals and they're trained to work with those who have suicidal tendencies, but you never know. And honestly, anyone could be feeling this way. It's worth it to open up a conversation and to talk about it, and hopefully to make it be less stigmatized. I don't think that it is great in our society that there are so many things people are afraid to talk about, especially things that when talking about them will help relieve some of that burden. So I'm just thinking how sad it would be to feel like you would want to take your life and also feel like you couldn't share that with anyone. Because that would just be such an extra unnecessary burden. So which leads me to my question, which is how can we start the conversation on suicide to help those around us? How can we open it up? I mentioned being straightforward and direct earlier, but anything else that you think would be helpful in this conversation? And here's my references. Where is my thing? And that is it. Thank you.